Okay, hello gentlemen. Because last lesson there were some of you who could not join the lesson, and therefore, to make you all be able to attend the class, I have decided to make it as a recording. So, in the end of this lesson, you will be having a very simple Google quiz of the topics that I have taught. Okay, so all the answers are actually available on your textbook. So today we are going to talk about French Revolution, and by the end of the lesson, you'll receive a Google link, and you will finish the task, and it will be counted in your CA mark. So the questions are very simple. They are very simple multiple choice questions. 咁喺今堂完咗之後咧，你哋就要上網做一個好簡單嘅 Google Quiz，因為就睇下你知唔知道發生緊啲咩事嘅啫。咁基本上如果你有聽，跟住你又對住本書，其實你好難錯嘅，係啦，咁就會計你哋 CA 分嘅。Okay. So if you have any questions, you can email me after this lesson. So last time we talked about American Revolution. So I hope you understand the meaning of revolution. Revolution is very different from reform, simply reform. So revolution is it involves power. Okay, so it involves some overthrowing attempts from the public or from some organizations. So today we are going to talk about the actually the third form of revolution, that is the French Revolution, a very important history in the world. So the French Revolution, it is very famous, especially for the flag. Okay, so this flag today, it is called it is the national flag of France. So it actually happens during the French Revolution. OK， 咁法國大革命喺歷史上係一個好大嘅事件嚟嘅。So it involves overthrowing of the absolute monarchy, and this flag, this three-color flag, actually has a meaning. It represents the revolutionary ideas of the people. So during the French Revolution, the people or the National Assembly, the party that opposed the government, they wanted to fight for something. Okay, so this flag, this three-color, respectively represented some revolutionary idea that we are going to talk about. So French Revolution itself, it is very important because we always say that it is the making of the modern world. So nowadays we see that the world is very modern, or we see especially in the European so-called strong society, they are so-called very modernized. So 我哋講一個現代嘅政府。So it happens because of the French Revolution, okay? And that's why it's very important in history. Many ideas that are prevailing in this society nowadays, it is originated from French Revolution. So it involves people fighting with the government. It involves some anti-government organizations called the National Assembly. It involves the fall of Bastille. It is a jail for political prisoners. So it involves many similar ideas that we could observe in the modern world. So let's begin. So background of the French Revolution, were actually France, it had been operating under a absolute monarchy. So again, a very quick review, I have mentioned many times. So pay attention that we are talking about, write it wrong. So we are talking about absolute monarchy now. So absolute monarchy with a Y, it means the system. Okay, so the government system with a king. Okay, and absolute monarch without a Y, it is referred to the king. Okay, the people. Okay, so pay attention to the difference between the Y. Okay, so yes, France has been under the governance of absolute monarchs, and we know that with the absolute monarchy, the inheritance. Okay, it is based on the clan, the family. Okay, so the royal family was called the Bourbons family. They were dominating the French rule. Okay, so they were a very strong family that had been ruling France for many years, and one of the very famous king was called Louis XIV. So Louis XIV was a very famous king. Okay, he was a very strong king. Okay, so Louis XIV was a very strong king in the sense that we call him the Sun King. Okay, sun in past it was a very important symbol of the power. So he was a very strong king in the sense that he expanded the boundary of the territory of France， 所以令到法國個領土大咗好多。But his grandsons and his sons are basically not that well, basically not strong at all. So these are not good kings. Okay, so French Revolution happens because of this. French Revolution happens because Louis XVI is actually not that strong. So therefore, people began to challenge Louis XVI, that is the grandson of Louis XIV. Louis XIV 係好強嘅，OK， 但係 Louis XVI 就好弱嘅，OK， so that we are going to talk more about that. So the background is that France has been ruled by absolute monarchy, and the family, the royal family, was called the Bourbons family. Bourbons was the surname of Louis XIV. Okay, so let's go to the next page. Okay, how can I clear the rubbish? Hey, how can I clear the stuff? Let me see. Clear all drawings. Yes. So let's talk about Louis 16. So he was named as the Sun King of France in the sense that he was a son. It means very close to God. Okay, so he was a Sun King of France. That means he was appointed. He was strongly trusted by the God, and he centralized the power. He helped to expand the boundary of France. So he expanded France, the territory. He won in many wars. Okay, he spent a lot of money on military in order to expand his boundary. And therefore, there was one saying that there was one king, one law, and one faith. So people believed strongly in Louis Louis XIV。OK，Louis 14係得到好多市民嘅 public support 嘅原因係因為佢個 governance 好強啦，佢 central 佢令到法國好強大啦。法國嘅好強大，即係歐洲入邊法國係好強大，冇乜人夠膽搞法國。咁去到後期，我哋上課學過 Seven Years War， 咁英國喺歷史上都係一個大國啦。咁去到後期。Louis XIV 退咗落嚟先開始打 Seven Years War 嘅，咁所以我哋會見到就係原來法國其實曾經係一個好強嘅國家。我哋有一個講法就係話 One King, One Law, One Faith， 淨係相信呢個 king 嘅啫。Okay, so this was the background. Okay, Louis XIV was so strong. But very sadly, so you see that Louis XIV, he established France as a very strong military power. However, his successors, including 15 and 16, were not strong leaders. 咁啊，Louis 15同16就好差嘅，尤其是 Louis 16 he was controlled by his wife. Now, he was not a good leader. Okay, Louis 16, he was not a good leader in the sense that he could not know how to fight. So he in military aspect, he was not a very good leader. But at the same time, he wanted to declare war with others. Okay, but at the same time, he fight with many people, and at the same time, he loved spending on luxury. So at the same time, while he was not good at fighting, he was, and still he declared many war. And at the same time, he spent a lot of money on luxury. So we see that these involves many money. So how will this money come from? It was from the public. People, they have to pay for more taxation. So that's why you see people do not like Louis XVI, okay, because he was so luxurious, and he was very weak. And more importantly, he was controlled by his wife. He listened to his wife called Queen Mary, and his wife was again a very luxurious woman who loved many beautiful things. 如果大家有聽過凡爾賽宮咧，咁啊 Palace of Versailles 咧，咁其實就係當時呢個 Queen Mary Antoinette 去要求要起嘅。So the three Louis all spent a lot of money on foreign wars, and more importantly, the king and the queen, they lived in luxury. So you see the photo here, it was the Palace of Versailles. It was very big. It was just a very, you see the photo, the first photo is just a very small part of the hall in the palace. Okay, so the second photo here, you can see that, well, the geographical location, the geographical area of the Palace of Versailles is actually very, very large. And it was just for the king and the queen to live in that. So you see, it was very luxurious, and more, and these luxurious life, they need money. Okay, they need money. And how they got the money? They get the money from people. But at the same time, the people, their life was not good. The government did not really help them to get a very well-off social life or economic life, and therefore the people were not having a good economic life as well. And while the government has been spending a lot of money on these luxurious constructions, and at the same time they were defeated, especially Louis XV and XVI, they were defeated in many wars. So while you were defeated in the wars, you have to pay for compensation, and therefore in around 79-89, the French government was almost bankrupt， 即係話個法國政府基本上係接近財政癱瘓嘅啦，因為佢打輸好多仗，同時間佢又走去得閒又打下 Seven Years War 7年仗喎，要用好多錢嘅喎。American Revolution 又關到佢事嘅喎，咁所以就嘥咗好多錢啦。咁而有時如果佢打輸咗錢咧，佢又要賠錢嘅。咁所以基本上成個法國喺100年內咧，就突然之間要用好多錢啦。So, and during this period of time, there were a lot of Enlightenment ideas. So I think I hope you still remember what Enlightenment is. Enlightenment means the enlightenment of thinking. Okay, so during this time, people began to think about enlightenment of thinking, and it is all about the thinking of the social, human, and political rights. So this is what we do in the Enlightenment. So there were some Enlightenment thinkers like Montesquieu, like Rousseau, like Voltaire. They were all opposing monarchy. They were absolute monarchy. They were opposing the absolute monarchies. And at the same time, there were some new middle class. The new middle class in France, they were called in France. So the new middle class in France was called the bourgeoisie. We'll talk about that later. They were very typical with very good education. So there were more people with good education, and they buy in the Enlightenment idea. So one of the very important Enlightenment idea was called the liberalism. Liberalism, I hope you still remember, it means freedom, basically. It means freedom to the self, the freedom to your natural rights, the 3 natural rights that you have learned in Enlightenment: your right to life, your right to property, your right to liberty. So because of the very poor governance of the French government, people began to, and the educated people, they began to think, why should they still listen to the absolute monarch? Why should they obey and give money to support the absolute monarchy? And this was one of the important reasons that lead to the French Revolution. So, and other causes of a French Revolution is that, well, I hope if you still remember, during the Second Continental Congress of the American Revolution, France got themselves participated as an ally of the American in the sense that there were more French soldiers. There were many French soldiers being sent to the US. Well, after they get back to, when they get back to the, well, they joined in the American Revolution and they fight with British Army. But once they got back to, after the revolution, once they got back to France, well, they returned to France. But remember, at this time, France was almost very bankrupt, or they had a very poor economy. So these soldiers, they began to be failed to find any jobs after the war, okay? So they were jobless and they suffered. And at the same time, they were increasingly angry. And at the same time, they saw that, well, the Americans, they overthrow British. So these people, they began to think whether they should buy in the revolutionary idea. When they went to America and they saw that the Americans succeeded in gaining independence, succeeded in overthrowing the tyrannical rule. So these French soldiers, when they got unemployed and they got angry, they began to go into revolutionary ideas. So this is also one reason why there was the French Revolution. So this is a very important, another very important cause of the French Revolution. So it was called the three estate system, a very super important concept that you must know. The three estate system, or we call that Ancien regime. Ancien regime, or the three estate system, basically means that in the past there were three social classes. Okay, estates means the social class in France. Okay, so yes, so we have this three estate system. That means there were three social classes. So the top social class was the clergy. Now clergy means church people, churchmen. So the most powerful people was not king. Okay, remember the top level was not king. Okay, well, king actually not in this rank. Okay, the most top, the first estate was called clergy. They were the people who work in the church. Remember, because why we have absolute monarchy？點解我哋個帝制會成功？係因為我哋從好多制度上，我哋都係相信天子嘅概念。So in the West, we have learned about the theory of the divine right, right? Of the king. OK， 咁我哋會曾經學過一個概念，就係話個 king 點解可以有權咧？其實原來就係因為個 God 去揀佢出嚟。市民係覺得，大眾係覺得個 king 係由 king 個 king 係由個 God 去揀佢出嚟，咁所以啲人係唔會 oppose 佢嘅。咁所以亦都因為咁嘅關係咧，嗰啲 king 係唔會夠膽得罪 church 啦。所以喺以前嚟講咧，最高層咧係屬於 the first estate， 就係屬於 clergyman。OK，clergy 再講多次即係 church people。OK。So the second rank was called the nobility. Nobility means that the noble class, so they were the very rich people, they were well off. And the third estate was called the commoners, okay, the common people. So we pay attention that, well, actually the common people, they represented the 95% of the population. 咁平民入邊咧就有98% 人都係屬於第三個 estate 嘅。咁而但係喺投票入邊咧，喺一啲譬如話 Parliament 投票入邊咧，如果當 in terms of voting，OK 個比例係1比1比1嘅。咁但係個問題係我哋會見到喺成個制度上面，呢度係佔咗98% 嘅人嚟嘅喎。 但佢只係得一份嘅投票。咁所以你見到 many policies, so therefore many policies or many votes, they favored the very few top estates。咁基本上以前咧投親票都冇意思嘅，因為永遠都係1:1:1噶嘛。咁嗰98% 嘅人佢哋只係得一票嘅啫，可能。OK， 大家嘅投票嘅比例一樣嘅時候，好多 policies 都係 favor 緊頭兩個 estate。OK， 咁呢個係一個好重要嘅概念，大家要知道所謂嘅 on-sale regime 就或者所謂當時嘅 social inequality， 就係就住好多社會嘅政策啦，其實平民咧係基本上有意見都冇用，因為個投票比例嘅問題。And the second thing is that you also need to be aware of the diversity in the commoners。我哋作為平民入邊都有分嘅喎，咁啊平民入邊都有分兩類人嘅。咁第一類人咧，我哋就叫做 bourgeoisie。These are the very very important people in French Revolution。bourgeoisie 咁 bourgeoisie 就係一啲我哋叫佢做一啲新型嘅 new middle class。OK，we call them the new middle class。有一堆新嘅 the new middle class, such as, so these people were usually educated, but they belong to the commoners. Okay, sometimes they belong to professionals. For example, they are doctors, they are accountants, but they are commoners. So they were educated, but at the same time, they were oppressed by the 3 estate system. And there were also some people called the city workers. So the 3rd estate, it included these 2 groups of people. So bourgeoisie itself, it means it is a French word for the middle class. Okay, so they were some rich commoners. They did not have much political revolution, but they were educated. And therefore, they buy in some enlightenment. They got into some enlightenment ideas. So they got into some enlightenment ideas, and therefore they tried to buy in some revolutionary ideas. So remember, for the commoners, okay, which is the 98% of the French population, part of them belongs to the bourgeoisie. Part of them belong to the workers, or the very generally the peasants. The difference is that these were educated, and therefore they began to initiate to overthrow the French government. Okay, so this is what we call the that's why some historians say that because of these knowledgeable people, the French Revolution was also called the bourgeoisie revolution, because it was these people who suggested the revolutionary idea. OK， 咁所以 bourgeoisie 好重要就係因為佢哋好有知識，咁同時間佢哋亦都係佔平民嘅大多數，佢哋好受到一個教育底下，佢哋開始接受到好多 enlightenment 嘅思想，所以佢哋就會開始覺得，當面對咁多不公義嘅時候，佢哋係咪應該要推翻呢個政府？佢哋就有一啲革命嘅念頭啦。OK。So we have a very brief introduction of the causes of French Revolution. So it included the first reason was the Louis, or what we call the Bourbons family. So Louis XVI is the weakest, okay? But before that, we call that the Bourbons, sorry, spell it wrong. The Bourbons family. Okay, so starting from 16, Louis XIV. Louis XIV is a very good king. Louis XIV, he was very good king, but he had many wars. Okay, so these wars need a lot of money, but Louis XV and XVI, They were very, very weak. Financial difficulties. So because of the wars, because of the luxurious lifestyles, so such as the Palace of Versailles, the French society almost got into bankrupt. So the Enlightenment ideas that promoted absolute, the liberalism, promoted some revolutionary ideas, promoted freedom. The American Revolution that inspired many French soldiers to overthrow the corrupted French government, and the social inequality, the three-edged system. Okay, so there were some bourgeoisie who were educated, and therefore they go for Enlightenment ideas. They were educated with the Enlightenment ideas. Okay. So this is a very brief introduction of French, the causes of French Revolution. So now it is your time. So this is an assessment, a very simple multiple choice questions. You should be able to finish it within 2 minutes, okay? So try to finish it on your own. The QR code is over here. And after finishing, submit the work and you can take a good rest. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.